of all the world.
Oh, wow! Oh, no!
Massa has hit Perez and is out of this race in spectacular style.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben Schneider. And first off, if you've been waiting for this video, I owe you an apology. I got the NASCAR ones out in pretty quick succession. Then it took me almost 4 months to get around to doing the IndyCar video. And now it's taken me over a year to get to the F1 video. I can't really say I have an excuse, I just took up a lot of other projects that interested me, and I've been very busy. But hey, you're watching this, it's here now, so today, let's take a look back at the 2014 Canadian Grand Prix. As I've mentioned throughout this series, I became a motorsport fan around 2006, and was fully immersed in both NASCAR and IndyCar by the end of 2007. What took me a little while longer to get into, though, was what's considered by many to be the pinnacle of motorsport, and that's Formula 1. And looking back, I have no idea why this took me so long to start watching regularly. Speed Channel held the US television rights at the time, and I was watching plenty of NASCAR and Monster Jam on a weekly basis, so I don't really know how I avoided getting into F1 for several years. I know I didn't have cable growing up, but I was at my grandmother's house frequently enough that you'd think I would have stumbled across it at some point. Now don't get me wrong, I did have some basic knowledge around 2010 or 2011. For instance, I knew Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber were teammates at Red Bull. But if you had told me Multi-21 in 2013, I would have had no idea what you were referring to. Yep, that's how long it took me to get into F1. I was a race fan in 2007, yet I missed out on the McLaren Spygate drama, the Hamilton-Alonso rivalry, Kimi winning the title by 1 point, Crashgate,
Is that clock?
the Braun GP miracle, Michael Schumacher's comeback from retirement with Mercedes, Vettel's Red Bull dominance, the crazy 2012 season that saw 7 winners in 7 races, the Multi-21 controversy. I mean, I had no idea all this was going on. And looking back, it's one of the greatest regrets of my childhood. I could have been following along as all of these things were unfolding in real time, but nope, they're history to me because I wasn't into F1 yet. I mean, honestly, what took me so long? I'm kicking myself in the rear end because I missed out on so much good stuff in that era. Now, the priest at my church at the time was actually a pretty big race fan himself. I remember being in church one Sunday afternoon as we were enjoying refreshments and fellowship after the service. We were talking racing and somehow F1 came up in our conversation. I remember my dad asking me how much I knew about F1, and I told him that I didn't really follow the series as a whole. But I did know Sebastian Vettel was the king of the sport at the time, who seemed to be winning everything. My priest then told me, you know, Vettel hasn't won a race this year. And this got my attention, because I knew Vettel had ended the 2013 season winning 9 races in a row, which tied an F1 record. As fortune would have it, it was June 8th, 2014. And F1 was racing in Canada that day. Most of the races take place in the morning on the East Coast since they are in Europe, but the Canadian, United States, and Mexican Grand Prix are all obviously in the afternoon for us. Not only that, but the start time also allowed NBC to put the races on network television, which they only did a few times a year. Intrigued by the fact that the guy who had won 4 championships in a row was winless at this point of the year, I made the decision to sit down and watch the entire 2014 Canadian Grand Prix, making this my first ever F1 race I'd be watching from start to finish. And what a race it was, because it was one of only 3 races in that 19-race season that was won by someone other than Mercedes teammates Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. Now, there was a reason Vettel and Red Bull weren't on the top form they were on the previous few years. Formula 1 entered a new era of regulation changes going into the 2014 season, that saw them switch from V8 engines to V6 turbo hybrid engines. And Mercedes cracked the code on these things and have won every single Constructors' Championship since. Talk about dominance. I mean, you thought the Patriots winning 6 Super Bowls in 18 years was impressive, or the Bulls winning 6 titles in 8 years in the 90s was an incredible feat. This team won both championships 7 straight years, and has won the Constructors each of the last 8. At this point in the season, every race so far has been won by either Hamilton or Rosberg. The two of them were longtime friends growing up in karting, and they're now in their 2nd season as teammates at Mercedes. Now that the car they share is so dominant, they find themselves in a battle between each other for the World Championship. This put a strain on their friendship, specifically during qualifying at the previous race at the Monaco Grand Prix. Hamilton thought Rosberg had deliberately caused a yellow flag, forcing him to abort his lap, and handing Rosberg the pole position. However, the two addressed the media before the Grand Prix in Canada, saying their relationship as teammates had since been restored. I guess they had no idea what was to come. Young American driver Alexander Rossi drove an FP1 for Caterham in place of Kamui Kobayashi. It would ultimately be his final drive for Caterham, as he moved to the Marussia team in July. In qualifying, Hamilton paced both Q1 and Q2, but Rosberg put in a faster time in Q3 to claim pole position, with Hamilton joining him in second for a Mercedes front row lockout. Vettel was the best of the rest in third, followed by Williams teammates Valtteri Bottas and Felipe Massa in fourth and fifth, and Vettel's Red Bull teammate Daniel Ricciardo in P6. Keep an eye on this guy as the race goes on. Now, despite my best efforts, I was unable to find the full NBC broadcast of the race. And I have to say, I'm kind of disappointed about that. I grew up with Lee Diffie on the call for these races, and I wanted to experience that again as I rewatched this. I did, however, find a copy of the Sky Sports broadcast, which I've never seen before. So in a way, I'll be watching something brand new here. I also know F1 is a bit more strict with copyright stuff, even if you are providing your own commentary and analysis for fair use. So I'm probably going to try to edit this a bit differently than the other videos in the series. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. I miss the old F1 logo. The new one is fine, but the hidden 1 in the old logo was just so clever. It's like the 31 in the Baskin-Robbins logo for their 31 flavors.
Welcome along to the Ile Notre Dame.
This sounds so empty without the F1 theme in the background. It's one of those things we didn't know we needed until we got it. Ah yes, the number 1 on Vettel's car. Hard to believe this was 8 years ago now. I also miss Rosberg. I wonder what the last few years would have looked like if he hadn't retired. Who would have thought that Caterham driver would go on to be an Indy 500 winner? 22 cars! You see, everybody, there is room for Andretti in Formula 1. Help me remember it's John-Eric Vergne at Toro Rosso and not Max Verstappen. I do not have any memory of these thermal images. I wonder what Luis Torres thinks of the old graphics, so Luis, if you're watching this, let me know in the comments. I know you have strong opinions on these things. Why do I feel like George Lucas just randomly shows up to almost every race? And in the words of Crofty,
It's lights out, and away we go, and it's a decent start from Lewis Hamilton.
Hamilton gets a pretty good start, but Rosberg cuts him off and forces him into the grass, allowing Vettel to take second. In the third corner, the two Marussias come together, requiring an early safety car. Thank the good Lord Jules scored those points. There's no way this team would have survived as long as they did without them.
Marshall's doing an excellent job to recover the debris, but they're going to have to get the brooms out.
Why didn't they start with the brooms? The cleanup takes a little bit of time, which allows the drivers to save fuel under the safety car so that they can push harder at the end of the race. The race restarts on lap 8, and Rosberg pulls out a comfortable lead over Vettel. Sergio Perez picks up a spot on Jenson Button, and the field starts to settle in.
I'll get the reason for Caterham's retirement and get back to you.
I love the underdogs as much as anyone else, but I would love to know what Marussia and Caterham added to F1 that Andretti supposedly can't. Kvyat goes around briefly, as Hamilton finally gets around Vettel for P2. Ricciardo comes into the pit lane in an attempt to undercut the Williams teammates ahead of him. Williams respond by bringing in Bottas, and Button brings his McLaren into the pits as well. Vettel comes in on the next lap, and pretty much the entire grid follows within the next few laps. Rosberg makes his stop on lap 18, handing Hamilton the lead until he makes his own stop a lap later. In the meantime, Rosberg nearly throws his entire race away. Once the pit lane settles down, Daniel Kvyat cuts the chicane while battling with Kimi Räikkönen, while Pastor Maldonado retires with the loss of power.
Down the inside, and the hairpin Hulkenberg has to take evasive action, but Vettel runs deep.
Is this where FS1 got their camera workers for this season? Get away from the crowd shots! Meanwhile, Hamilton is really beginning to close in on Rosberg. The gap is down to half a second coming to begin lap 25. That does not seem ideal. But hey, the leaders can keep fighting because even in an era before the virtual safety car, local yellows exist. Take notes, Road America. The tables have turned. Felipe is faster than you.
So Rob Smedley, I'm sure, will resist the challenge to say, hey, Felipe, we should say this to Fernando. You're faster than him.
Well, here I was thinking I was clever, but Crofty had the exact same thought.
Perez is doing it on the super soft tyres. You know, we're 28 laps into this race now, and he's on the super soft tyres.
Well, we know he's always been a master of tire management.
Okay, we are extending this stint at the moment, Checo.
What did I just say? Imagine telling people a year earlier that a Force India, Red Bull, and Williams would be fighting for position halfway through a race. Finally, Perez makes his stop as the race hits the halfway point. Bottas dives into the pits for his second stop, and Red Bull responds by bringing in Vettel on the following lap. And right as it looks like Mercedes are going to run away with it again, this happens.
I've got no power, guys. Okay, we're looking into it.
Reliability.
Not there anymore.
Okay, Nico, we're trying to solve it. We believe your teammate has the same problem.
Just coming round the second turn, Ricciardo ahead of Sebastian Vettel then on the track.
Well, that could be big if the Mercedes men both fall out. But surely that won't happen, right?
Why did you not let me stay out? I could have gone faster once Hulkenberg hit it.
Even before he got to Ferrari, poor Seb was being screwed by bad strategy. While all this is going on, Kimi goes around, but gets going again without issue.
The man most likely to seize an advantage right now is Felipe Massa for Williams.
Can you imagine how popular a Massa win would be? Look at the lap times. Something's about to go down.
Okay, Felipe, want to see if we can try and make these tires last to the end?
It's getting more exciting by the second.
Okay, Nico, situation. Both cars have the same problem. We don't think we can resolve it. Obviously, you need to pick the pace up because P3 is catching you now.
Right, pick the pace up even though we can't fix what caused your pace to drop in the first place. Rosberg makes his second stop and gets overtaken by Massa at pit exit. Hamilton stops a lap later and comes out ahead of Rosberg, but behind Massa. Rosberg gets back around Hamilton, and while Hamilton takes a shot at it going into the final chicane, he cuts the corner and is forced to give the position back. And then, things go from bad to worse.
He's locked tyres, he's locked his front left. Oh, Hamilton.
Brakes have failed.
Oh, and it's the end of the race for Lewis Hamilton.
So I remember Steve Matchett saying on the NBC broadcast that if Rosberg could hang on to this, it would be nothing short of a miracle. And I can see why he said that, because with 23 laps left, it looks like Rosberg is toast.
Looking after the brakes now, your teammate has a problem. Most important, you finish now.
Well, I guess Williams have decided they can't stretch it, but I would have told Nico that Lewis has more than just a problem. Kvyat's out. Man, this is quickly becoming a race of attrition. Are we sure Rosberg finishes second?
He's got a nice gap compared to Perez, who's only got a few car lengths.
Well, I guess Perez is on a one-stop and has to manage his tires, so... You're telling me there's a chance? Look at the top 8, all in one shot. This is fantastic! Maybe Massa has a shot at this after all. You can just tell from the Ferrari onboard that, wow, their 2014 car absolutely stunk. Where's the AWS overtaking chances when you need them? They're holding each other up perfectly. This could not be working out better for Massa right now. Dang, that's over a third of the field at this point.
5 cars crossing the line, separated by less than 2 seconds.
I don't know that I could have chosen a better race to watch all season. Any one of these 5 cars could legitimately win this race right now.
I've just popped into the Mercedes garage. There aren't any fingernails left. They don't believe. They're amazed how Nico Rosberg is managing to do this.
Rosberg is one of the most underrated drivers ever. Ah, Felipe needed that. 5 laps to go and Ricciardo finally gets by Perez, freeing him up to chase down Rosberg. Don't you just love back markers? Oh, no wonder he was so slow. See, that's how you do it. And the unbelievable effort from Rosberg is going to come up just short. Ricciardo takes the lead. And he'll hold it all the way to the final lap, when the battle for P3 goes slightly wrong. Vettel gets by Perez, but Massa takes both him and Checo out trying to do the same.
Vettel taking the right line.
Oh, and Felipe Massa goes into the back of Sergio Perez, and that is a massive crash into the barriers.
So that's it. The race obviously ends under the safety car, and Daniel Ricciardo becomes a first-time winner.
Nobody can overtake you. You're going to win the race. Just stay positive on the Delta, mate.
Mercedes failed. Red Bull pick up the pieces. It is Daniel Ricciardo that comes home to take the victory.
How did Vettel not get wiped out in this? How did Button get up to 4th? Isn't that smile infectious? I guess this was the Shoey's predecessor. Can I just say I really miss the podium interviews? Come to think of it, F1's basically adopted the front stretch interview too. So it turns out I dug a little bit deeper and I was able to find some video clips on NBC Sports' website, so I guess I might as well react to bits of them.
For the lead of the race, it's Ricciardo rounds up Rosberg.
The perfect season looks about to fall by the wayside once more.
We threw it out there time and time again. Can Mercedes do it? Can they keep that perfect season intact? It's looking unlikely with 1.5 laps remaining.
I remember Steve Matchett bringing up the perfect season at Spain in 2016 when Lewis and Nico wrecked each other.
The perfect season for Formula One, Lee, it is over. It is over.
These guys were doing so well. Nobody in Formula One has taken the perfect season. McLaren got so close, 15 out of 16 in 1988. These guys look so good, so well placed to be able to bring it home, and they have thrown it away.
It was always interesting to keep track of in this era where Mercedes were so dominant.
In just his 7th drive for the World Championship winning team, Daniel Ricciardo is a Grand Prix winner and breaks the Mercedes run.
Lee is so good at what he does. Even with the race ending under the safety car, there's a certain energy that he brings that's hard to replicate.
Final lap, boys. Think of all the... Oh, wow!
Oh, no! Massa has hit Perez and is out of this race in spectacular style.
There were obviously very similar reactions from each of the commentary teams to the last lap crash. The NBC crew seems to think it might have been brake failure for Massa.
That looked like brake failure to me, or Perez stopped trying to pull up in early. The force and speed at which Massa hit him was colossal.
And unless I missed it, I don't think the Sky team ever mentioned that. Either way, Perez would end up being given a 5-place grid penalty from the next race. So in reality, the stewards decided that he was primarily at fault. Well, that is a massive weight lifted off my shoulders. Again, if you've been waiting for this, I do apologize. It just kind of got forgotten, and like I said, I don't really have an excuse. I was reminded of it with the return of the Canadian Grand Prix, and I figured I finally might as well take care of it. This is going to conclude the series for now. The only other one I could kind of see myself doing is the 2011 ARCA race at Michigan, because that's the oldest ARCA race I vividly remember watching from start to finish. But I know I'd seen bits and pieces of ARCA by then, and last I checked, the full race isn't even available on YouTube, so this is it for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.